workshop. Thank you for attending. Just a quick round of presentations. We come from Speckle, as you would be aware. Wrong screen. There you go. And today we're going to give a workshop on how to become a Speckle power user. I'm Alan Rin. I'm a software engineer at Speckle, and my background is not in software engineering. I'm by trade a building engineer. That was very much a geek during my university, and I slowly drifted towards software engineering instead of doing buildings. And Bilal, I'll let you present yourself.
Yeah, my name is Bilal, joining from Turkey. I'm solutions architect at Speckle, and I'm also an architect by background. Yeah, I'm really excited about this workshop.
So we're gonna do I guess most of you would be aware of what is Speckle and how it works, but to kind of like not make any assumptions, we're gonna do like a super quick intro on what is Speckle, how it conceptually works, what are these different parts, etc. And then we will go down to the actual interesting part of going through some of the most common workflows and giving you some tips and tricks along the way on how to make these workflows work for you, and also some of the caveats that you may find. Starting by going like our biggest user base is usually Revit to Rhino or Rhino to Revit, vice versa. So we're going to do a quick intro on that, on how to tackle that type of problem, but also an overview of the Grasshopper components, which are quite complicated and complete, and how do those play with Dynamo or in comparison with our Dynamo components, and how to play doing some Grasshopper Dynamo interop for more complex or custom workflows. And finally, we will go to a more like visual side of things, trying to give you some tips and tricks on how to target Speckle data into Blender. And we will tie it all up with a couple of tips on how to use your 3D models or show your 3D models in a PowerPoint presentation and in Power BI using our Power BI data connector and our brand new alpha stage Power BI visual, which we will talk to you all about it later. So with that said, we will do some smaller breaks as we advance through these different workflows. So everyone has a moment to catch up, kind of like settle your thoughts on everything that's happening. And if you have any questions, obviously fire away. So ideally, we will be stopping here and there and giving you a chance to intervene. And if you're having any issues, try to solve them along the way. But as you see, we're going to be covering quite a varied amount of software. If you don't have some of these softwares installed in your computer, that is fine. You will be able to follow along regardless, and we will share all of the files and Speckle data that is being generated alongside these interactions, so you could still follow along at least the parts that you are interested in. So with that said, let's just go through a quick intro on Speckle as a thing, as an invention. It started in 2015 with our founder, Dimitri's PhD at UCL, but it has been growing up until then with a kind of like organic growth, companies and users liking the product and starting adopting it internally. And finally, it has grown into its own company, where we decided to rewrite the whole Speckle code into a more manageable, hopefully better 2.0 version, which is the version that we're going to be covering right now. We are currently a team of 17 people. Bilal, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe we're a team today. But so there's a couple of faces missing here already. But we're all either dedicated architects or engineers that switch to software development, or software engineers that have like a knack for geometry and the types of problems that we're solving in our industry. So first question would be, why would you choose Speckle? Why should you care? No? Well, we will all be very familiar with this, but I'll just go through it quickly. Our industry has a lot of fragmentation in the data that we generate, and it's all kind of like clumped down into data silos that prevent or hinder collaboration in the way that we want it or conceive it should work. But also we have a bunch of legacy software monopolies that their whole interest is to keep you tied into their specific platform of choice. And this also leads these solutions to be error prone and slow, because there's no real need for them to improve them. No? Their whole point is they want you to stay within their boundaries. And most importantly, nowadays, they are not really web ready. They're getting there. But those are kind of like the main problems that we see our industry having in the collaboration, interoperability kind of space. And Speckle is trying to solve it in its own way. So what is Speckle as a software? Wait a second, I need to unmute someone. Speckle as a product is basically an interoperability platform, which basically means that you can send and receive geometry and metadata from multiple applications without the need of files. It's all based on a server running on some cloud infrastructure or machine in your office. It's also a collaboration platform that allows you to give granulated access to different users for different sets of data. So some people may be able to only read a specific set of data, but others will be able to modify it. So you have that type of control to collaborate. Why do I keep clicking before I'm finished? To collaborate in real time. And finally, it is an automation solution that allows you to build on top of our technology more or higher detailed or better oriented to your use case tools. And we may showcase a couple of them later on. But this could be understood as something as simple as a Slack bot that notifies you every time somebody changes a data set in Speckle or a model in Speckle, or something as complicated as a carbon calculating tool that will run a simulation every time you update your building in Speckle. No? So there's like a wide range of possibilities there, but it's obviously very developer oriented. So for interoperability, I dropped this video here, but it basically showcases how you can very easily go from Revit to Rhino, Rhino to Revit. But in our particular case, we're going to do it in the workshop. So I'm just going to skip it. And we cover a vast quantity of connectors. Some of them are in a more mature state than others. So for example, today we're going to see Power BI, which is still on an alpha type of stage, which requires feedback and more development to be a polished product. But we also have connectors like for Rhino, Revit, Grasshopper, Dynamo, AutoCAD, which are more mature and more capable of being used in actual projects and actual professional work as of today. Our collaboration platform is basically web-based, and it's basically a website where your server that lives in your server that allows you to grant access to users, share your models embedded in different applications or in different websites, and have control over the information that is stored on your Speckle streams that are understood kind of like projects. We'll see a bit of that later when Bilal starts the workshop. But it's basically just like a way of accessing all your data and managing who can access it or not, and how everything is labeled etc. And it also contains a 3D viewer where you can view your models online, color them by different properties, filter them, and we also have a commenting feature that is currently being worked on, and we would love your feedback on that, but we will showcase that one later. And finally, our automation platform, which, as I said, is just a way for other developers to build on top of the Speckle technology and the Speckle SDKs. So you can do things like react to a specific event using webhooks or GraphQL subscriptions to have some sort of like live notification or services that react to when changes are done in Speckle. You could understand it as you could build your own like kind of like CI that checks for quality some models or executes some operations or calculations based upon them. And a very nice example is Arupe's Carbon tool, which we should update this graphic because they have a new Carbon tool that is built on Speckle 2.0. That basically would give you an estimate of the carbon cost of a specific building design every time you push a new change to Speckle. So nobody needs to kind of remember to do that computation. It just happens automatically at every change that is shared. And you always have access to not only the original geometry, but also the report that was generated afterwards. So how does this work? In very simplified terms, it works by how we made it work is by developing a set of plugins, or what we called connectors, that basically are specific to each app. So Rhino has its own plugin, AutoCAD has its own plugin, Revit has its own plugin, which are the ones that are in charge of helping you extract or import the data that is inside Speckle into your own application. The way that you send data to Speckle is by creating what we call a commit. And this is basically just understood as a snapshot of your model or the subselection of the model that you were wanting to share at that specific moment in time. So it's just like a fancy terminology. There's plenty of software developers here, so you will all be familiar with what a commit is in Git. Hopefully you can relate. Then you can organize your data inside Speckle or your commits by this like higher organizational structure that we call a stream, which you can understand it as a project in a sense. No? It's just a way to group and keep some data linked in a specific box. And each stream can have different branches, but by default, it has a main branch, which is what, if you don't specify where your data should go, it will end up going to the main branch. And we will see more about this later. And you can always create additional branches, which can be understood. They're not specifically the same as Git branches. There's like technological differences in the background. But in like the design space, you can understand them as different design options or different alternatives that you want to evaluate. But it's like kind of like a flexible thing, so you could also use them as storage for completely different parts of your building. No? So a branch could you could have a branch to hold your architectural model and a different branch to hold your structural model. So it's kind of like open to whatever your needs are, but in essence they're kind of like design options or different kind of boxes where you can place your data in. Once your data has been pushed to Speckle, you can always view it in our 3D viewer if it's something viewable. If you push like an Excel datasheet, it may not be viewable in the 3D viewer, but if you send some geometry and like some Revit models or some Rhino models, you should be able to view and analyze not only the 3D geometry itself, but also the metadata that is contained within the objects themselves. It also has like an activity feed and a couple of other things to help you keep track of what is happening on inside your streams. And finally, we've talked about sending, about organizing your data in Speckle, and obviously what you want to end up doing is receiving it somewhere else. And that is just as easy as specifying either a stream, a branch of a stream, or a specific commit that you want to receive in your connector. We will see that different connectors have different ways of doing this. So we will cover this throughout the workshop. And finally, like we've been talking about connectors a lot, and the Speckle web as a thing, but our connectors, like when we talk about our connectors, usually they look like this. It's just an extra window in your application that gives you access to the latest streams that you had and allows you to specify certain types of filters that you want to apply to your send operation. So instead of, you don't need to send your entire model, you can just send a specific category of objects or a specific selection of objects depending on your specific needs. We'll go all over the UI part of this when Bilal starts the Rhino workshop. But most importantly, the way that you can find all of these connectors, or at least the vast majority of them, is by installing the desktop manager, which is now called Manager for Speckle since the last release. But this, you will find desktop manager references all over our community, so we left it as is for now. So basically, this is just like a small program that runs on your computer that keeps track of what connectors are installed or not, what connectors are available, can deal with updating connectors to newer versions, and also keeps track of your local accounts. So you can access multiple Speckle servers using different accounts if you need to. So you're not bound to one specific server. And finally, we have our basic web portal, which just has a very simple stream and feed page that allows you to see what has happened lately on the streams that you are owner or a reviewer of, but also allows you to filter out your latest streams or your latest commits to find the data that you are looking for on the web. It works on mobile too, so feel free to give it a try and try to break it. We would love to hear about models that don't work on mobile, so we can improve that in the future. And as I said, you can also grant permissions by user, so you could only read the data, write the data, or have access to modifying the stream itself. And you can also make streams public, so even people with no Speckle account can view the data with if they have access to that specific link. And with that said, I'm not sure if anybody has any questions until now. Maybe I've gone too fast. But yeah, feel free to stop us at any moment if anybody has any questions about this. If not, maybe it's time to jump in and actually start doing some Speckle stuff. What do you think, Bilal?
Okay, anyone? Any questions so far?
I see the chat.
Can you share that presentation? Yeah, we've already shared that on the Slack channel, so you can access that from there.
Yeah.
And we also share the Notion page where you can find it there as well. Yeah. So anyone having trouble to access to Notion or Google Drive, just let us know.
I got a question.
Yeah, shoot.
This is Jonathan. Do you need a desktop version for data visualization and metadata organization, or can you just do any of the processes you described for Speckle in any of the versions, or like mobile, web-based, and desktop?
So the way it works is that like the desktop manager is basically designed so that end users can install the application plugins, but once the data is in Speckle, you can access it through a GraphQL API. So you basically open to doing whatever you need to do anywhere you need to do it. We do have some SDKs for C# and Python, which make your life easier if that is the language that you happen to need. And some NPM packages for JavaScript, which we use on our front end to make the life easier on that end too. But if you just so happen to need to do like Ruby or C++ or whatever other thing, you should be able to do it without us. No, like the data is there, you just need to query it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice question.
Right. Any other question?
Cool. Well, I guess it's time to get started.
I guess so. So yeah, everyone. As I said, I've shared the handout link in the chat as well, but we also added it in the Slack channel. Maybe not all of you are there, so just in case if you missed it, we have a workshop handout where you can, find all the related workshop files or the Grasshopper scripts we're going to use, anything they are in there. So yeah, as we said, we're going to start with some Rhino to Revit, Revit to Rhino interaction. And then I guess we're going to continue with Grasshopper, Blender, PowerPoint, whatever. So yeah, we will have a couple, what we have in our mind is that, have some workflows and use cases where Speckle can be useful. And even if you have some sort of familiarity with developing, you can also, expand Speckle's capabilities on your own. Either create your own application or, build on top of it, whatever. Yeah, Speckle is, by the way, open source and free. I think we forgot to mention that at the moment. So, yes.
Yeah, we forgot to mention the free part.
Yeah, so we had, a couple things needed from your side. The first, I think you need to have an account. Let me share my screen actually, so we can go to the handout as well. So yeah, if you want to follow along this workshop, you need to have a Speckle account. You can create one totally for free at speckle.xyz. I've added a link to that in our Notion page. And also you need to download the manager for Speckle, or as Alan mentioned, desktop manager, which allows you to install, different plugins, or as we call them, connectors into your desktop or Mac environment. So we are gonna use a couple connectors or plugins, and you can install them through Manager, Revit, Dynamo, Rhino, Blender. These can be installed from Manager, but as we said, not all of our connectors are in the same maturity, so we need to install some of them from our GitHub repo. So let me actually quickly show you how you can install the Speckle Manager. So you can simply go to our website, and from there go to the downloads page, and from here you can simply download the Speckle Manager for Windows. If you're using Mac, you can download the Mac version. After you install your Speckle Manager, let me enable that. As I said, you need to create an account on speckle.xyz. So let me show you that as well. So this is the page you'll see when you first sign up. You can sign in with your Google account, or sign up with your work email address. So once you create your account, we need to connect our manager with your account. So to do that, simply open Manager for Speckle, go to Account, and you have the Add Account button. If you don't have any account, I think it'll directly take you to the speckle.xyz page. So from here, you can simply type in the server URL, either speckle.xyz, or if you have your own company server, you can type in its address here. And if you click on Go, it's going to do some authentication, and you'll end up having your account just like I have here. All right. I think it's pretty straightforward. First, download Manager, create an account on speckle.xyz, and then add your account to the Speckle Manager so you can install and interact with the Speckle server.
I think it bears mentioning that Speckle.xyz is our free server, but obviously, since it's free, your companies may not approve of dumping project data in a free service. So as Bilal said, since we are fully open source, you can always have your own deployment of Speckle. And if your company just doesn't have the know-how or the resources to have people running a server for them, feel free to contact us, because we also do that. Right now we don't have like a pricing. We would need to talk to Dimitri about that, but it is an option that we can deploy a server for your company if that is a need that you have.
Yep.
So just know that you have plenty of options to choose from, either the free server or self-hosting or hosting by us, and anything in between.
Okay. So, once you are done with the Editing Account Manager, you can now install plugins, or as we call them, connectors from Desktop Manager. As we said, we're going to use a couple softwares in this workshop. We're going to use Revit, Dynamo, Rhino, Grasshopper, and Blender. These can be installed from Manager. So let's open Manager one more time. And, installing plugins is quite easy. Simply find that find that software within the list of our connectors, click on that, and click on install. You're done. If you want to install some sort of like a beta release we made, then you can go to Versions tab and install it from there as well. Right, so for Revit, you can search for Revit and click on install. It'll install for Revit. One note though, like if your Revit is open, your installation will not succeed because you need to close it for us to be able to install our connector. Same thing is true for Rhino and Grasshopper as well.
Yeah.
Right. So same thing is true for Dynamo. You can, search for Dynamo, install it from there. One note though, Rhino and Grasshopper connectors are bundled. So if you install one, you will have the other as well. So you don't need to install it twice. Okay. So as Ellen said, we're also going to use Power BI, and we also added their links in the Notion page. So if you want to follow along the Power BI part, simply go to the first repo, and it'll take you to the releases page. And I guess the 0.0.12 is the latest release we made. And you need to download the speckle.mez file from there. If you want to follow along the Power BI part of this workshop, download the speckle.mez file from there. I think you also have the instructions in the Power BI repo.
Yes,
but just in case, let me show you where to copy that. I think it was under Documents, Power BI Desktop, and Custom Connectors. Paste that MEZ file into this location.
We will repeat this anyway when we get to the Power BI parts, but if anybody wants to get ahead of itself, you can go ahead and start downloading all of it.
Yeah. Same thing for the Power BI Visual, which contains our 3D viewer, right? So you need to download the PBI Viz file from here. Okay, I guess. So do we have any questions so far? Because we're going to start with playing Speckle now.
Yeah, I've got a question. So for example, I have Power BI Desktop on my machine installed, but when I go to the document, actually, I don't see the folder to copy that MEZ.
If the folder doesn't exist, feel free to create it straight away.
We just create it. Okay.
It's Power BI defaults to that folder for any external data connectors, but doesn't create it necessarily. So you can just go ahead and create it yourself.
Thank you so much.
Just make sure you have the spaces between Power and BI, because people make mistakes.
Yeah, the full path that you need is in the README, so you can go ahead and copy it from there.
Okay, any other questions? Everything is good? Great. So as I said, we shared some files in the drive. So we share 2 files, one Rhino and one Revit file. Let's start with the Revit file, actually. So yeah, this is the Revit file. And once you install Speckle connector for Revit, you end up with this new tab called Speckle. And let me actually close this from here. Yeah, when you click on Revit connector, you'll end up with something looks like this. You can also dock this panel into anywhere you want, right? It's quite easy to do. So let me take this one. So let's give the right-hand side to Speckle. Let's put project browser right under the properties. Okay, so this is a Revit project we created for this workshop, which is actually quite simple. Let's go to the floor plan. You know, it has a couple offices, and we have a main hall with a couple tables. We have a cafeteria, WCs, whatever. This is, I think, a 2-story building, right? And then we have this area where I have 3 workshops, the corridor, WC, and some administrator office. So Divang says that
yeah, we don't. There's no files in the Google Drive.
Let me see. So I think you should be able to view it. Can you view it?
1 sec. I'm gonna double check on my side. Let me just share you the link because we couldn't upload. There was some error uploading to the Google Drive of the workshop. So in the Notion page, we shared another Google Drive link from our own site.
Yeah.
Let me just paste it in the chat here too, so everyone can grab it. There you go. Hopefully that should do. We will pop them into the workshop. We'll pop everything into the workshop once they give us the right privileges. But meanwhile, you can grab everything from there.
There's 2 Revit files in here, an STR and an R.
Yep, one structural and one architectural model. Yeah, what you can do is simply go to manage links, and then from there, you know, reload it from the structural file. I mean, we try to make it as realistic as possible. That's why you have 2 Revit files there. Yep. One is for structural, and the other is for architectural model. Okay, so let's start with the Speckle side of things and the scenario we have in our hands. So, like, what we have is, you know, some interior designers or computational designers are not really comfortable using Dynamo or not really familiar with the Revit, and they're mostly Rhino geeks or Grasshopper fans, so they don't want to really leave that environment. But the Revit is, you know, the place where you document everything, so it's your common place of work. So we need to somehow bridge this gap between, you know, Rhino, Grasshopper, and Revit environments. In this use case, we will try to replicate that and try to come up with some sort of like a design workflow between Rhino and Revit. So first thing I'm going to do is we need to create a new project, or as we call them, streams in Speckle, right? So I will create a new stream by clicking on this Create New Stream button. And then, you know, in the first tab, you have your servers. I guess in your case, you have only one, Speckle.xyz. And then what we can do is we can create, let's name this as AECtech 2022 _workshop. You can also give the description, and we can make this project either private or public. In this case, let's call it public. And I'm going to create this project. Now a new project is created. As we said, we are working in web environment. So if you go to Speckle.xyz, let me actually turn off these 2 speckle.xyz. Under my feeds, you can see that I have created this file, and it's available right here. So, 1 second. Okay. So as we said, by default, we have a single branch called main. And just for now, I'm going to stick with it and send my data from Revit to this main branch. So let's go back to Revit now. And as we said, we have two modes. We can send data from Revit to Speckle, or we can receive data from other platforms or Revit, meaning Speckle to Revit. So in this case, I want to send stuff from Revit. And when it comes to sending, I have a couple options. First is the branch, or the model, the folder I want to send to, and also how or what do I want to send. If I click on everything from Revit will be sent to Speckle and converted into Speckle's platform agnostic format, including levels, family types, project information, not only the geometry, but also alphanumeric information in this Revit project environment. All right. So I'm just going to stick with the everything filter, and I'm going to click, let's say, send everything. You can also add a description to your commit. So whenever we send from Revit or any other software, whenever we send to Speckle, we actually make a new commit, or as we call them, it's like snapshots, taking a picture of the current state of our environment. Or we can also describe them as maybe like versions of your project. This is converting them into Speckle's format now and uploading it into the web. So let's go to speckle.xyz. It'll take some time.
Seconds.
Yep. Let me close my curtain.
Yeah, so what basically is happening here is we were not only converting the Revit proprietary format objects into our Speckle format, but also serializing them as a JSON and sending them one by one to the server. So depending on your connection, this can be faster or slower, but it also depends on the amount of data or like the size of the building that you're trying to send.
Okay, it sent successfully. Let's come back. And we have a new pop-up, and let's view this comment. So here we go. The same model we had in Revit, but in Speckleverse. Let me actually share its link to you guys in the chat.
Yeah.
Share it with everyone.
Because hopefully you can see the faces. Let me join.
Yeah, please everyone try to
too.
join to this stream. Yeah, once you get into there, you will see this. Okay, this is going to be the screen you see, and just click on the latest comment, and you'll end up here, hopefully. Okay, Alan is here. And we have some other people. Tessie, Knut, and Mike. Great to have you guys here. So as you said, we're providing this 3D viewer environment and creating some sort of like a collaborative experience for you. On the left-hand side, you have the data view. So you can also, investigate what you have sent from Revit in here. So one thing I realized is that the windows are dark for some reason. And I guess that's because we've also sent it rooms from Revit. And rooms are basically, 3D, I guess, like extrusions in Revit. So let's hide them from here. We also have the toggle visibility option. And once I do that, look at that. Okay, one thing I realize now is that we are missing the structure, right? If you look at it, I don't have any of the columns or beams, so these curtain walls are floating in the space. So I think we missed to send the structural elements. So let's go back to Revit now. I'm going to come back to Revit. And understand and advanced settings, we have an option called Send Link Models. So if I enable that, click on Save, and let's add description, edit structural model, and click on Send now. Now what Speckle is going to do is it's going to also include the linked models, in this case, this linked structural model, and we will be able to see and receive the linked geometry in any other platform as well. So now it's converting the structural elements to, but I think this should be a bit faster than the previous one. Since we've already sent before, it doesn't need to convert everything from scratch.
Yeah, it should be, this one should be ever so slightly faster. There it is.
Okay. Here we go. The description, edit structural model. So, if you go back to your stream page, to our stream page, click on main. Now you have two snapshots or two comments, right? The first one was created 4 minutes ago, and the last one is created less than a minute ago. And I can also see their description right here. So now I'm going to hide the rooms one more time just to make things easier. And let's get into the viewer. You can also use WASD while holding your right click. So, and, look around. I guess this is cool, right? So when you double click on an object, Speckle will center that. So you can, orbit around it. Let's double click on this door maybe, or this window. This looks good. Okay, so the scenario we have in our mind is that, I need to receive this information in Rhino so I can create my custom interior furniture design in Rhino, right? So let's receive this geometry in Rhino. So we've also included a Rhino file in the, let me see the name of this project. So this is an empty project. Yeah, bgn_ac_22 3dm file. You can use that. And as you can see, I've already created the furniture as well as the ceiling design for it. But let's hide the ceiling design as well as the furniture design for now. So yeah, we also have the Speckle Rhino connector installed. So let's assume that you don't have any of that. You have your default Rhino screen. How do you enable Speckle? It's quite simple. Simply type in Speckle in your command line, press enter, and you will have the same dockable panel you had in Revit. So what we can do now is let's put this right next to our layers. Here are my streams or projects. So now, as you remember, we created a project, and what was its name? Let's go back. AECtech 2022. So I'm going to search for that. AECtech 2022. Here it is. Same project. Let's click on that. And this time, I don't want to send from Revit. I don't want to send from Rhino, but I want to receive from what's going on. Yeah, whenever you share your screen or when you're in Zoom, your computer starts to behave differently, I guess. Okay, here we go. It's back. So yeah, this time we want to receive that Revit model in Rhino. So let's go to the Receive tab and expand this. And we are receiving from the main folder, okay? And let's receive the latest snapshot, latest data. Great, so I'm gonna click on Receive, and Rhino will, Speckle will start to create your layer structure as well as the geometry. So you end up with what you have in Revit. Look at that. It's right here. Let me zoom extend. And here it is. So I don't need rooms, so I'm going to hide them. And let's change our 3D view into perspective so we can get into our building. All right, so one note, currently we are converting the Revit geometry into mesh. So what we end up with in Rhino is a mesh geometry. But Rhino likes B-reps. It also likes meshes, but it loves B-reps. And both Revit and Rhino are NURBS based. So if there was a way to convert your Rhino geometry into your Revit, I don't know, get it into the Revit environment for documentation purposes. And there is. So let's go back and enable our furniture design. So our interior designer created this shelf as well as this design on the cafeteria side, right? So this is the design, and we've added some materials to them. And these are native Rhino elements. So let's say that we're done with the designing in Rhino, and now we need to send these guys into Revit. How do I do that? So we need to somehow structure the information passing around between softwares. So what I'll do now is I will create a new folder in my project. So let's go back to speckle.xyz. And I'm going to create a new branch or a new model. And I'm going to call this as furniture design. And click on save. So now we have a new folder. Now I want to send our furniture design into this folder. I'm going to come back to Rhino, and I'm going to lock the received geometry from Revit. And by the way, since we are doing a quick demo, I've already created the geometry. But in real life use cases, the geometry will be created after receiving. So let's select this furniture design, and let's go back to the send mode, or I can actually go back and create another, add another stream to this same file. And after I select them, let's send them to the furniture design from here. Click on select. Now I have 19 objects selected, and we're going to send them to the folder we've created named furniture design. And let's give it a description, first iteration, maybe. And can I send by layer? Yes, I can. So if you go to layers, let's do that actually. And let's select the furniture design, right? Since my furniture design was in the same layer, right here, furniture design, I can also select it from here. And you can also send multiple layers at the same time. Yeah, there are four ways to send. You can send everything from Rhino, or selected layers, or your selection, or the project information. In Rhino's case, it is the camera views, I guess materials, things like that. Mm-hmm. So any questions so far? Am I going too fast? If so, please. Yeah.
I think it may be worth mentioning, since we're here, that at no point we've talked about which units is Revit or Rhino being modeled in. And that's mainly because Speckle takes care of that conversion for you. So you could be working with an American Revit modeler that models in feet, but your internal designer may want to model everything in centimeters for whatever reason, because that's what he's comfortable with, or because that's how it's going to be built. So when, like, if you notice, Rhino, the Rhino document that Bilal is in is currently in centimeters. So whatever units was the Revit model modeled in would be scaled up so that they are modeled in centimeters when you receive it in Rhino. So basically, if you had it in Revit was modeled in meters and a table was 1 meter length, when you received it in Rhino, we would have scaled that like 1,000 or like 100 times, so it would be 100 centimeters length. So you would, like, the size of the model would match the units of the document you are receiving that model in automatically. It is quite neat, and you will never notice that that is happening until it happens unexpectedly on you because you have the wrong units or whatever. But yeah, it's quite a neat self-making feature.
Okay, another question from Adam. Can you directly send Grasshopper geometry, or does Speckle require everything to be baked to the model? Yes.
You can do both. Yeah, we will see that later, the Grasshopper part.
Besat?
Yeah, I was going to ask, like in the beginning, when we wanted to actually create a stream in Revit, we should have just linked the arc model and structural model, or just, for example, we're working on the main model, which is architecture model, and then we just link the structure. My point,
Yeah.
my question is that, let me clarify. My question is that, should we just open a new project and link the models, or we can just have already the model, which is architectural model, and then we just link it?
You can open architectural model and go to manage links and relink the structural model.
Yeah, which one would be faster? Do you recommend that we just?
I don't think. I mean, either way, it's going to take some same time because we're converting them into Speckle elements, so we need to somehow access the information.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, I think either way will take the same amount of time. All right.
Could I ask just a quick, this is one part of comment that might be a bug, and then I'll lead it into a question that might need an answer. Just last week, I was doing exactly what you did, which was exporting linked models from Revit. It was a very complex model with different survey points and base points, and no matter how I tried to adjust what point it was using, I could never get those models to align in the exported Revit. So I don't know. It was a very complex Revit model. But to lead it into a question, when we find something like that, is there a place we can go to report issues?
Yeah, definitely. Speckle community, our forum, you can report that there. Or if you're familiar with GitHub, Speckle Sharp, or the related repo, you can create an issue and report it there as well. But if it's not an issue or rather a question, then Speckle community is the right place to go like this.
Yeah, I just posted the link there.
Thanks.
But yeah, we're always happy to get complaints about like super complicated models that are not going through as expected, because that helps us identify like edge cases and weird conditions that happen that we weren't anticipating before. But we can definitely prepare for in future versions if we know that they're happening. So feel free to report away and absolutely anything.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a quick UI question, and maybe I missed it. What is the light bulb that's right next to the send button?
Yeah, this is actually the preview. Like, you can preview what you are going to send. So let's say that you are really far away from the model. You want to see what you're going to send. So you can simply click on that. On send, it's going to focus those elements. On receive, it's going to create a preview of the geometry you're going to receive within Rhino, right? So before receiving, you can actually see what you're going to receive and how it looks.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's send this furniture design layer into the furniture design folder. I'm going to click on send. This should be quick. Okay, sent successfully. Let's view it online. Okay, so let's go back to here, and our first iteration is right here. So I'm going to just open that, and here is my folder with the with the materials, colors, looking good. All right, so let's go back to Revit now. So yeah, the thing that I want to do now is that I want to receive that geometry in Revit, so you know it aligns and goes to the correct place within the model. So let me create a section box pretty quick, and let's do something like this so we can see the interior. So our cafeteria. Yep. Now what I'll do is, in this case, I don't want to send anything from Revit, but I want to receive, receive from the same project. So what you can do is you can add multiple, settings from the same stream within the same project. So like, let's say that in this one, we are sending everything from Revit to the main folder, but now I want to receive from the same project, but from different folder and, different data from different software. What I can do now is I can go to the same project. This time I'm not going to send, I'm going to receive. So I can click on receive, come here, change my folder to furniture design, and click on receive. And now what it should do is it should create that geometry in its correct spot, just like so. Since we did not, specify any category or anything, they came as generic models. But the beautiful thing is Speckle is preserving the material colors you've assigned in Rhino. So what you can do actually is you can go to, how can I hide this thing on the top? I can't access to manage. Okay, so you can go to materials within Revit and find the one from Rhino. I guess I had it something like gray, or what was the name of it? Yeah, I think it was this one. So let's change its color to something fancy. Click apply. Voila. So we are creating a native Revit material in the background, so you can also play with it within Revit. So you end up with a more beautiful looking material within Revit. So let's say that we've made a design change. Instead of 4, maybe I want to have another one like so. So now let's say second iteration, and I want to click on send one more time, just like that. It's send. Go back to Revit. Here we go. We have another additional shelf there. Let's go back to Revit. And as you can see, Bilal Göker sent to furniture design second iteration. Whenever I make a send from Rhino, I get a pop-up warning me that I have a new one. So maybe I can update my model within Revit. So let's receive it. And here we go. We have another one right here. All right, so this was our first scenario. And I guess I hope I impressed you with some, Rhino, Revit, Rhino back and forth workflows. Do we have any questions?
One quick one on the material. You changed the property of the material, and that maintained as you updated the geometry. Would that the same apply if you changed to a different material, or would it switch it back?
I don't know. Let's see. Like maybe changing this material to wood. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
so?
and change it on either side. Yeah, on here or on the Revit side. Yeah.
I mean, any change you make in the Revit side say a material, like by default, currently you can't actually, because this is a direct shape created in Revit, and it doesn't allow you to do so. Let's say, like the Rhino is a source of information in this case. So, whenever you make a change within Rhino, I think it'll override any change you make in Revit. So you end up with what you have in Rhino.
I have a question about the direct shapes. Do you have any options while you're still in Rhino to designate which geometry gets pushed as a family in Revit? Like, let's say if you have Rhino blocks and you would like those to translate as Revit families, is that an option?
Not yet. I mean, through Grasshopper, you can create families, but we are aware of that limitation, and we are actually planning to create some sort of like a UI or
we currently have some sort of like mapping feature that we're experimenting with in Revit that it was initially intended to map structural elements like structural beams to Revit elements properly. But we're thinking to extend that onto the AutoCAD, Revit, SketchUp blocks so that they become proper families. So it's not something that you can do just with Rhino right now, but you will be able to pretty soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. We are working on it, and we are aware of that limitation. We actually have a couple ideas when it comes to that.
Very cool.
Yeah. So right now you can send blocks from SketchUp to Rhino, Rhino to SketchUp, AutoCAD to say like anything that understands a block, it will be sent nicely. In Revit, they are created as like geometry groups. I'm not really sure of the specifics right now, but I'm sure it will be some sort of like group entity in Revit. But yeah, definitely we are planning on having an option to map those into some specific families of your choice, so that they are like fully native Revit things instead of geometry.
And I guess to follow up on my chat question for the subcategories, is that something that's also in the pipeline to assign subcategories that are attached to geometry instead of materials?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can do that already in Grasshopper. In Rhino, it's something that we're exploring what would be best to how to deal with that in like a building scale type of thing. But yeah, in Grasshopper, you can already do that pretty straightforward.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, everyone, if you don't have any questions, maybe we can take a break now, Alan?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break just to allow everyone to absorb everything. If anybody's wanting to kind of like prep for the next mini part of our workflows, we're gonna do next Grasshopper and Dynamo. So feel free to go ahead and install them. If you have any issues installing them, let us know in the chat. We'll be happy to assist you while the break goes on. If not, let's see you in 5 to 10 minutes max, and we can jump straight back to how to overcome some of these Revit Rhino limitations with the Grasshopper nodes that allow you way more flexibility.
Okay, guys, see you soon.
Cool.
Thank you.
See you in a bit. Okay, let me just pop open my Revit and my Rhino, and we can get this ball rolling again in a minute or two. share my screen. Beautiful. Okay, so let me just pop open the old model just to have everything as a reference. And we can get started with a bit of explanation of how Grasshopper actually works and what are the differences between Grasshopper and Rhino, what are the advantages, and how to play well with, or how to understand how the Dynamo and Grasshopper connectors work. So you can understand how you can kind of like push data from Grasshopper to Dynamo. This is specifically geared towards moments where our conversions don't really work for you, but you know how to do these things in Dynamo. You just maybe the conversions that we're using for beams or the conventions that we've decided to use for some specific families don't behave as you expected, but you can still send all the information through from one software to another. So you can then kind of like target with specific scripts your specific functionalities. So let me just, actually, I don't need the Revit for now. We can just go ahead with Rhino. And let me just, oh, Bilal, since you're here, can you make me the owner of the stream?
Oh, okay, let me do that. Do you want me to share my screen while doing it?
If you want to, yeah, since you added.
Okay, let me actually quickly show how to add collaborators to a stream as well. So everyone, okay, here we go. So we have a collaborators tab right here. So if you have an account on Speckle.xyz, when I search for your name, you will end up here. So let's search for Ellen. And it looks like we have a bunch of Ellen, but our one and only Ellen Ryan is right here. So I'm going to click on invite, and let's send an invite to him. Let me know when you accept that invite, Ellen.
Yes, let me just go ahead and do that right now. There you go. So now I can accept my invite, and hopefully I will now be a contributor, which means that I can send data to this stream, receive data from this stream, but I cannot add new people or change any of the settings other than if we want this to be link shareable or not. So I have like basic write permissions.
It just makes you an owner, by the way.
Yeah, but I don't have like full permissions to, for example, delete this data. No, this would be something that only the owner has the right to do. And since I'm here, and we left it there last time, it may be interesting to also showcase the nice capabilities of the Speckle viewer to overlap different commits. So we saw that you received everything in Revit, like in Rhino, created your shelves and your geometry, and finally pushed it back to Speckle on a different branch. So when Bilal was viewing the furniture that he sent, it was basically out of context. You just had some floating furniture in space, which is not extremely helpful to figure out what is going on and what things have been changing. But the Speckle viewer has this nice feature that allows you to, let me see if I can get this view right on point. No rooms, please. I don't know, my computer has decided to not really work today for some reason. Let me just grab that. There you go. So we have our fancy corner that should be filled with some furniture in one commit, and we have our shelves that our designer has sent in a different commit. what you can do is by pressing this blue add button here, you can add a different commit to your current view. So you can filter by seeing all the commits in your stream. But in this case, I just want to load the furniture design. And why is my computer working so slow today? No one would ever be able to know. Well, fail. If internet was cooperating with me, it will allow me to add from the main branch. There you go. This one is working. The structural model, and hopefully it will load not only our structural model that comes from Revit that Bilal sent, but also the Rhino model that comes from Rhino that Bilal also happened to send. And you can kind of like toggle visibility between one and the other. So we could do some quick double clicking there and then open it up again. And now we're seeing, too much. And now you can see both the information that your designer has sent alongside with the information that was sent from Revit. So you can kind of like verify better if things are as expected, etc. Even before receiving it in a different target application. So that's a neat little trick. And it's kind of an unexplored and unused feature of Speckle that we would love to see more use of. So we'll be happy to hear some feedback on it if anybody has some. But yeah, that was basically overlapping commits. You can kind of load as many as you want. Obviously, depending on your processor, computer, internet connection, etc., things will get slower the more you start loading. But in theory, you could load like 5 or 6 different commits without any issue in the viewer per se. So once you got your information in Speckle, we can go ahead and just replicate what Bilal did, which was receive receive the latest commit. I don't know why my internet is super slow right now. From main. So we can go ahead and receive that. And this is basically what we've been doing up until now. What's happening here is that since Rhino doesn't understand anything about bin elements, anything about levels, families, etc., what we do is we default to a mesh representation of those objects when those objects cannot be understood by the target application of choice. So we are getting the geometry information of our model, but basically because Rhino can only understand geometry plus some very basic metadata capabilities. For any other, what this means is that there's some loss to the data that you just received, no? Yes, you have the building in Rhino. Yes, it is the exact copy of what you had in Revit, but it is no longer modeled by levels, by categories, using families, etc., because that's like a Revit specific thing. It's now basically defaulting to a mesh representation of it, and when possible, with some extra metadata attached to it. For any other kind of like more complex workflows that you do need that information to be kind of like make decisions around what is being modeled, what we usually do is recommend using Grasshopper for any of that, because basically Grasshopper allows you to have some extra flexibility on how you receive the data, which has no loss, but also has the downside of you having to do the scripts. So there's like a gain versus loss type of situation here happening as always. So how does Speckle Grasshopper actually work. So once you install the Rhino connector, it also installed the Grasshopper connector and vice versa. And the first time you would open it, you would be seeing, hopefully, if everything went well, the Speckle 2 tab. And you may be noticing that I also have another bunch of Speckle 2 tabs, Speckle 2 Revit, Speckle 2 Structural, Speckle 2 DSA, to CSI, and to Tekla. These are kind of like application-specific objects that you can create in Grasshopper, send to Speckle, and receive as those native objects in the application of choice. In the case of Speckle to Revit, it would be Revit objects, etc. And there is some Speckle to BIM classes, which are generic BIM walls, ceilings, floors, etc. that should work properly across BIM applications also, which is kind of like the most common definition of a wall between ArchiCAD, Tekla, and Revit. No, so you could understand them as like the most generic form of that object. So if you're trying to follow this, you will have none of these tabs activated. This is because you need to first activate them manually. And in order to do that, we need to just drop any nodes. Since we're at it, let's drop a receive nodes. But it could be any node just to get a document started. And you will notice that there is a top menu now called Speckle 2 at the top of your document. And there's an extra option here called Show Hide Components, in which I have absolutely everything activated. So you can feel free to activate the tabs of the applications that you use or that you're targeting with Grasshopper, and deactivate everything else to prevent having like 20,000 Speckle tabs that you don't care about. And by default, all of these are disabled. So in our particular case, we're gonna want to activate the BIM one and the Revit one at least. The others are for structural, different structural softwares, and Tekla, which is kind of like a BIM modeling, detailing, kind of in the middle between structural and BIM modeling. But also there's a couple of extra nice components if you're kind of more advanced into the Grasshopper scene under the developer components categories. So feel free to activate those also if you feel like it. But we're not going to go much into them today. So let's just stick to the basics for now. So we saw that in Revit, in Rhino, the way to add a new stream was to manually search it and basically select it and configure if you want to receive or send on this click and point and click UI. Grasshopper, since it's a more programmatic program. Do I have the vocals? Yes, I do. We have different kind of like nodes for different operations that we want to perform. So there is a send node and a, why do I have to send nodes? And a receive node that basically do as you would expect. They send data to Speckle or receive data from Speckle. And the commonality here is that there is a stream input that you need to fill in. So where do you get the stream? Notice that we've been working on the web all along. So you just need to go to your website, your Speckle server of choice, pick either the stream URL, which is the URL where your main stream view is at, or one of the branch URLs. So just like copying this from Chrome, and let's just start by the simple one, the stream home. And basically, where's Grasshopper here? You can paste this in a panel. And notice that this is basically just like the URL of our Speckle server /streams/ a unique number that is the unique identifier of your stream in the server. No? And basically, Grasshopper will take this for valid to allow you to receive data on one click. And it basically goes through the same operation as Rhino does. It receives all of the objects inside that commit, but it has a small difference in that we've talked that Rhino has like a lossy way of receiving, where you will get all the messages, but some of the extra information got lost along the way. In Grasshopper, none of that information gets lost because you need to kind of like manually retrieve it. And so in this case, what you're getting is a big expansion of outputs that correspond to each of the categories of objects that existed in your model, and some other nice ones, such as everything containing the project information, or every detail that we've added to our project. And if you notice, if we just connect this into a panel, let's just connect furniture. What this is basically telling you that these objects that are here are Speckle family instances, no? And we can check another one, like the project information. It's only one project, one object that contains a set of Speckle project info. So how do we access this data? No, that is all, like Rhino was doing already all of the work for us to find those messages and bake them into the document. In Grasshopper, you have to do that extra step of knowing what is it that you're receiving and exploring that data to get what you want. And in order to be able to explore these objects, there's a node called expand Speckle objects. Deconstruct. I'm still like hardwired to the old terminology. Deconstruct Speckle object. If you don't want to write all of this, you can also write DSO, and that's the shorthand, so easier to get. And this is basically a variable output component that will expand the properties of the object that you input. No, so for example, in the case of the project information, it will provide us with the author, the address. The author, the address. Obviously, our project was not properly BIM compliant.
Yeah, I did that.
It's fine. It's fine. No judgment here. But you get the locations of your different project points, if there are any, the organization description, site name, etc. No. So basically, in Grasshopper, you use once you receive some data, you can use that DSO object to continue to explore. Okay, I want to check my rooms, and then this will provide you with a list of outputs of every property, every piece of information that a room in Speckle was saved with. That may include a level, which is a Speckle Revit level. So you may want to also do another deconstructor on the level itself to reveal its name and its elevation, for example. No, so it's basically you have full access to all of the different structure and the different like inner relationships of those objects at the cost of you having to physically kind of like build this and dig out the data that you were aiming for. In the case of our particular project, what we would kind of like to know is usually what is available in our specific project, what types are available, what families can I create, but also where are things at, no? So where's the geometry, no? Which is the important part that we're now currently missing. If I were to just hide my whole Rhino building and just try to visualize what I'm receiving in Grasshopper, notice that we're not really visualizing anything until we expand something that contains either some geometry element or a display value property, which is kind of like a specific thing in Speckle, no? And an object contains a display value when it's a specific Speckle object that also contains some visualizable thing, no? So for example, a door will contain a display value that is the mesh that kind of like represents that door in 3D. In the case of these rooms, we have this display value, which is the mesh representation of the, and I left, there you go, the mesh representation of each of the room spaces that we have in our model. Hopefully this makes sense, but please stop me if you have any questions. I see Vila is already kind of answering as I go. But yeah, this can get a bit weird at the beginning, so feel free to stop and ask away. So we've seen sending, we've seen how to explore our data, and notice that whenever possible, your data will be converted to native Rhino state or native Rhino objects. No? So in case of the display value, it is a mesh, but it's not like a specific Speckle mesh that we've created. It is an actual Rhino mesh that Grasshopper understands and can operate on. No? Same with any other geometry classes that Grasshopper can understand. This excludes, sadly, for now, blocks, because Grasshopper doesn't have a pretty much good grasp on Rhino blocks, but any other kind of like basic geometry that you can generate in Grasshopper, B-reps, sub-D meshes, boxes, planes, curves, etc. If encountered, we will translate back to the Rhino representation of those objects, so you can just use them in your Grasshopper definitions without having to think about anything else. No, you just need to go for the information that you want, be it numbers, or if it's geometry, it would be, if possible, converted into its native representation in Rhino. And once we've got here, let's say that we want to filter out this room meshes because for some reason I want them in a separate commit, just to make a simple send operation, and then we can go back to our example, sending back to Revit. So the way that you send data to Speckle is just the same as you would when receiving. You have a stream that you need to tell it where to send to, and remember that this could be like either the main stream page or the page of the URL of a specific branch in our stream. So hopefully you can create branches now. I cannot create branches. Can you make me owner or create a branch for me, Bilal?
I already made you an owner, actually.
Is it?
I mean,
am I in the correct?
Yeah, you can. You just click on the branch.
There you go. So we can just tell this is the building rooms. And this is just going to be the raw message of the building rooms, just as a separate box where I can push something, whatever I want. And now that we have this URL here that says the branch building rooms has no commits, I can copy this into my Grasshopper canvas as a text panel and connect it to my stream. And finally, I can have this mesh input that I can just plug into the data that I want to send. Once we have these two inputs, the component has all the information that it needs to go, but you can also always add a message. Obviously, in Grasshopper, you would want to auto-generate this message just to not forget to update it. But I mean, you can just say, building rooms. Boom. And when I press send, just as simple as that, it will convert all of these meshes into their Speckle representation and send them up to Rhino, to Speckle. And if you don't know where they ended up, you can always right-click your connector, your node, and there's always once you've sent some data into Speckle, there's always a view commit on whatever Speckle server you're at online button that will open a Chrome tab for you with that specific data set that you just sent. No, so in this case, our fantastic rooms. So this is basically like how you interact with Speckle with in Grasshopper, which is a fairly, I mean, if you're familiar with Grasshopper, hopefully this would be fairly straightforward and easy to understand. There is a couple of neat tricks and tips that you may not discover until you go deep in. So I'm just going to run through them. The way this works is that whenever you plug a data tree into your send stream, it will copy the entire data tree. So it doesn't run iterations as other Grasshopper components do, iterations per item or per list. It absorbs everything as a single unit, not the tree of data that you're sending. Sometimes, though, you may want to send more information than that. Maybe you want to send the mesh representation of the rooms and also some other set of Grasshopper geometry or data that you've generated. You can do that by adding new inputs to your send node, which obviously require to be filled in. You cannot send empty inputs. But what this does, it allows you to grab some extra information from some other place and send it packaged in with your message. Say, I also want to have the DSO, the structural columns. There you go. Beautiful. And where's my display value? I'm blind here. So we can connect this to our B input, and that way we're sending our room meshes and our structural column meshes all together as one single action that you can then use forward. So what this would have, how this would happen is that this is basically creating a custom Speckle object for you that contains a data property with a bunch of meshes nested into nested lists, and an A property with a bunch of meshes nested into nested lists too, because both of these are Grasshopper data trees. But obviously, sometimes the naming of these things are not very much representative of what it is that you're trying to do. So you can always change these to whatever you want. My rooms and my columns. And you can send those guys away. And hopefully this will have a new commit that we can go ahead and check. And if we expand our data view, now our side view will contain the name of our properties with all the information that they contain inside it. No? And if you hover over each of the groups of objects that we send to Speckle, notice that they are properly highlighted as kind of like belonging to the same thing. But once you pop this open, notice that you have like the same notation as you get when you are using Grasshopper data trees. All of this brackets 00, brackets 01, brackets 02, 03, which is kind of critical information from Grasshopper to keep, so you can properly organize your data within your Grasshopper definitions. What this means is that if you're doing Grasshopper to Grasshopper interoperability, so if you're working in a team of computational designers that you just split your definition into separate steps, and someone just needs to receive a set of data to continue with their work, you will not only be able to send the geometry, but also you will receive the exact same data structure as you sent. So if, for the ones that are not very familiar with Grasshopper, this may sound like gibberish, but for the ones that are, in essence, what is happening here is that you get the exact same structure of information, except for simplifying there, I think.
It's my columns, not my rooms. My columns.
Okay, beautiful. So this guy, there you go. I was like, how is this happening? So you're basically preserving the information one-on-one on Grasshopper, so you don't lose anything, and you can send like several packets of data trees the same way you can do with the default data input. Bad timing right now. That data input and data outputs components that some of you may already be familiar with, which are quite neat and allow you to send like packets of data trees by name instead of packing them all with an entwine or something like more oddly Grasshoppery. So,
Alan, I have a quick question.
Yeah, shoot.
How do you visualize non-geometry-based data? So if you're pushing, for example, metadata that has to do with the project into a stream, I just tried that, but I can't figure out how to visualize it in the web viewer as just like text data.
Yeah, there's no real way. Like right now, the actual kind of like stream view is extremely prepared for 3D data with metadata. So the 3D viewer doesn't know how to interpret all of that extra kind of like non-geometrical data that is attached, but you can still visualize it from the side panel. Although admittedly, it's more of a pain in the ass, if you forgive my language. We are looking into ways of displaying tabular data in the stream page. So like when there's 3D data to view, you can view the 3D viewer, but when there's no 3D data to view, you would still be able to view like the commit structure in a more pleasant way. But right now you can just like run through it through the, by just like popping open your different categories and checking the different values or the structure of what you've been sending. But ideally, like we haven't worked a lot on the verification side, like how to verify things on Speckle itself. But it's something that we're gearing towards, and we'd be happy to hear any complaints or lackings on that.
Okay, we have another question, by the way, from Devang. What happens to that custom property in, let's say, Revit? How does Revit deal with it?
So the way this will be dealt in Revit is kind of like the same way it's dealt in Rhino. The connector will try its best to convert what it understands. And if it doesn't understand it, it will kind of like continue to go deeper until it finds something that it can understand. No? So in this particular case, we have this object that is nothing in particular. It's just like a dictionary of data with 2 properties, and each property has a bunch of geometry in it. So when you receive this in Revit, what you would get is just those meshes as generic elements, period. No, there won't be anything else happening because there's no extra information for us to kind of like figure out what it is that you wanted from those meshes. No, they're just meshes. So they will become, each individual mesh will become a direct shape in Revit, which takes me to the kind of like BIM Speckle part of things. Now that we've seen how to create, like how to explore some data, send some data back to Speckle, operate with streams instead of by clicking in the menu, by using the URL of that specific stream. What we can do is go ahead and pop open the file that we had in the ceiling design. There you go. And I am actually going to
what I have in mind is actually maybe like Alan, I can try to send those curves through Speckle so you can receive them and use them. Maybe that would be more fun. What do you think?
Okay, I accept.
So you can create a new script, maybe.
Yes, I accept this.
So let me share my screen. And by the way, we also had another question from Yanis, who asked what happens if multiple people are working on the job and people commit to the same branch through different software connectors. So what happens is that every time you make a commit to Speckle or to a branch or to a folder, you don't necessarily have to think about it as a Git branch, because even though we're using the same language, we're not actually doing Git operations in the background. That's something we need to admit, I guess. So, the latest one will be the one that will be received in any other software, or like when you try to receive that folder, then by default, we will try to receive the latest one. And another one is is there an option to resolve conflicts? There are no conflicts because each time you send to Speckle, you're basically sending a snapshot of your data. So you don't actually merge anything in the web environment. If you want to merge stuff, you need to do that on your desktop local environment, either in Rhino, Revit, Blender, whatever you're using for.
Yeah.
So let's say that like we wanted to merge the geometry coming from Rhino, we will use the Revit environment for that. So we will end up with a single model that contains both Rhino geometry as well as the Revit geometry. Yes, so I'm going to share my screen pretty quickly, just to showcase, instead of another beautiful feature of Speckle, which is sharing information, not files, right? This is the catchphrase, I guess. So let's go back to the layers, and I'm going to hide what we had from the Revit side, and let's hide the furniture design. And this was what we had from for the ceiling design, right? So what I'll do now is I will go back to Speckle and create a new branch, and I will call this, or new folder. I'm going to call this as ceiling design, and click on save. Here it is, great, an empty folder. I'm going to go back to Rhino, and let's send the ceiling structure layer to the, I need to refresh my UI, so I'm going to refresh it just now. And let's send to the ceiling design folder, and let's send the layer of ceiling structure, and ceiling structure, I'll add this as like so. And I'm going to click on send. So what is going to happen is these curves that are Rhino curves will be converted into Speckle curves. So now you can actually view them on the web. Now it's your turn, Alan. Let's receive these curves in Grasshopper and create some native beam elements.
So let me just, I stopped sharing. I don't know why I stopped sharing, but I stopped sharing. So let me reactivate that again. Beautiful. So let me just create a new document for this. And we want to receive some data. So again, the easiest way to do this for Grasshopper is to just rely on your front end to give you the URLs. For the most part, you can write them up by hand, but I do not recommend that. Didn't you create a new branch? Why is this not showing up? There you go. Ceiling design. So I can just either copy this URL, or if I want this particular first iteration to always be the one that received, I can click on that object and notice that now my URL will be my stream ID /commits / my commit ID, which will mean that it will always fetch this particular snapshot. No, this may be useful in some cases where data changes a lot, but you don't want to use the new data until a particular moment or until somebody has verified it, whatever. But usually the most kind of like common use case is to point to the branch itself and always fetch like the latest snapshot of that information. So we can go ahead And whoa, yes, my computer is not liking me today at all. So we can go ahead and paste that in there, connect it to our stream, receive. It was receive, deserialize, and try to convert. And if successful, we should be seeing our beautiful curves in our Rhino environment. There is a slight problem though. It's not really a problem. It's more of a, if we tried to receive, let me see if I can open this. If we try to receive these curves in Revit, what would happen is that, as we've said, you're just sending curves. So we cannot just like automatically assume what is it that you want this to become in Revit. So they will end up being either model curves or detail curves. I think in the case of a model view, they will be model curves. And that would be basically it. Now, sometimes that is enough for you, but for the most part, those lines are something. No, they are beams, they are columns, they are specific families. They are definitely not just a line in your building. No, so in theory, what you want to be doing is model and send the information with the enough, send your data with the enough amount of information so that when it's received on the other side, there is enough information to make a decision about, should this be a beam, a wall, a window, a ceiling? Like, what is this that you're sending me? No? Let me just try to find my computer. Back, not this one. Sorry about this. Why is this not? Oh, it's driving me crazy today.
It's under workshop. No, it's under workshop.
Did you move it?
Yeah, I did. AECtech 2022 and files or whatever.
Yeah.
You can open yep, open architecture.
This guy.
Yeah, by the way, the Grasshopper definition is in the send to Speckle Grasshopper definition.
Yeah. I was just going to create it more or less from scratch since I have your curves. It's pretty straightforward. So we have our building here. Hopefully we can go to a view. So we have our roof. We have our hopefully our stream that we can add. And we can tell it that we want to receive from not main, from ceiling design. And from ceiling design, we want to always receive the latest. But again, same way as in Grasshopper, you can paste the URL for the commit. You can always also say, okay, I just want to pull this particular snapshot in time. You will notice that there's this square with this blue logo, Speckle logo. Usually this happens faster, but once our server actually does some operations of the background, you will have available a 360 kind of like preview of the data that you committed. So you can actually see what is this commit that I'm about to receive before physically receiving it. But if you're doing like send receive operations pretty fast, we usually work faster than the computer can create the preview. It takes like a minute or two to actually get it to appear. So if I just go ahead and receive this, you will notice that it's now creating like the curves, but the curves are just that, they're curves. So this may be helpful in some cases where you're going to use that information, that geometric information, to model on top. Say you have like some defining lines of your terrain that you need to keep the distance to or whatever, no? But for the most part, what you want to be sending is not those particular lines, but what you want to be sending is actual beam objects or actual column objects. So the way that you can do that is with our Speckle to Beam tab. But more specifically, since we're targeting Revit, we can use the Speckle to Revit tab. And inside the architecture, if the structure here, inside structure, you would have the Revit Beam node that once you drop down, it's fairly straightforward to figure out what is it that you need to do if you're familiar with Revit. It basically requires you to tell it, okay, this is a Revit beam. So every Revit element needs a family and a type, because that's what Revit is all about. So you need to specify a family name and a type name for that family. You also need to specify a baseline of our particular curves and a level where these will be created. No. Also, you have optionally a set of parameters that you can include that will be attached to the beam when it's created. And Bilal, please stop me if I say something that is not the case. I'm pulling this out of memory right now. So in theory, there's a lot of this information, the family, the type, and the level. There's a bunch of information that you don't really know as a Grasshopper user, mainly because usually when you're doing your Grasshopper scripts, you don't really care about any of this. No, you have some geometric restrictions, you have some algorithmic kind of sliders that you can manipulate, but you're not really bound to levels to create your objects. No, in Grasshopper is a much more free environment. So in this case, no, you could just let's say we know that the family is called fake family, and my type is called fake type, which obviously are not going to exist in my project. No, this is the whole point of doing this. So this is basically done. We have a family and a type that we think is correct, but it's really not. We have a ceiling structure that are basically just planar curves, and we can connect that to the baseline of our Revit beam. And lastly, it's asking us for a level. And again, right now we have no idea about what levels exist in the Revit project. We don't even necessarily know about the Revit project existence, no? But we need to create some sort of level. So there is, as you would assume, a Revit level node inside architecture that allows you to specify a name, an elevation, and a Boolean in case you want to create a view for that level upon creation or not. And you can also do a Revit level by name if you know that there's a particular level that exists already in your Revit element. No, you have both options. In this particular case, I'm going to go for Revit level by name, and I'm just going to write level 0. Obviously, I'm making a lot of decisions of information that I do not have, but we're going to fix that in a second. Let's just kind of like walk through the how do I create a beam in Speckle first, and then we can figure out, okay, where does all of this information actually come from? No, so now that we have our family, our type, our baseline, and our level, we can see that we have created a bunch of Revit beams, and we can now go ahead and send that to our, I'm just going to use the same branch that we sent the original geometry in. And I'm gonna press send there. So now that we've done this, nothing has really happened on the viewer side of things. No, if you load your data in the Speckle viewer, you will still be seeing the lines that we sent. But if you click on one of them, is this going to deceive me now? Yeah, in the sidebar. But if we actually expand this in the sidebar, we will see that our data is now a build elements beam, Revit beam, which basically says that, okay, this is no longer a curve, this is now a beam that contains a specific curve in it. No, so you already kind of giving the information that your beam, that your beam's authoring software will be able to understand, so that when received, this will no longer be some generic geometry. It will be the geometry that you needed it to be, with some exceptions, because right now, if we receive this, I invented the family type, the family name, and the level. So you're basically crossing your fingers that this will work. There's a very easy fix for this, but first let's actually see what happens. If I actually press receive on this, and I hope this doesn't explode in my face as I'm doing this. Did this work? Did this not work? What just happened? What just happened? Okay, beautiful. So since we invented a bunch of information, there's a bunch of stuff that went wrong throughout the process. And Revit is still thinking about it for some reason. So whenever these things happen, which they happen regrettably, sometimes you send things that are wrong or that are properly created. For whatever reason, one of your objects goes wrong. You can always check in the report what objects have gone wrong and what is the error. This is mainly for informational purposes. You also have access to the ID of the object, which allows you to view it on the web. And when possible, you can also preview that specific object to see which one is the problematic one. But I can tell you already what went wrong here is that either the level didn't exist or the family didn't exist, and
level didn't exist.
Yes, level didn't exist, so you cannot create anything from a level that is non-existent. So, I mean, having this guesswork game is hell, as we would all agree. So the best way that you can solve this is by providing everyone with the project information of your Revit environment, so that everyone knows which levels exist, what height they are at, etc. And we can do this super easily by using filters. So let's go ahead and add a new card for our stream. But instead of pointing it to main, I'm actually going to point it to the to a new branch, and I'm going to call this branch project info. And in my filters, instead of selecting everything, I'm going to select project information. And within project information, I can select the levels, the families and types, and the project information available. I could also send the 2D views and the 3D views to share like common points of views of Revit in Rhino, etc. But for now, I actually just need my levels and all the families and types that are available. So let's go ahead and send that away. Beautiful. So successfully sent online, and we can go back to our Rhino and say, okay, we received our beams from our computational designer that doesn't know beam, but it's a killer in Grasshopper. So he sent you some curves. And now you need to kind of like figure out, okay, these curves actually need to be beams in Revit. And I need to actually generate them properly with the proper type and the proper level. So what we can do is receive in a different receive node our recently sent project data. If this would help me. So we have a new commit on our project info. Let's just copy that URL. Paste it right there. How are we doing in time, by the way? Okay, I think I must speed a little bit up this. Nearly done. Yeah. So we can receive our project information, and this will contain the levels that are available as Speckle objects. So we can actually say, okay, let's just do our Grasshopper thing. Pick the first one. Do the Speckle thing and deconstruct it, which will give us its properties. And with its properties, I can take the name, which is level 1, and plug it in there. So now I am sure that the actual level exists, because that level information is not something I'm inventing or something that I'm assuming that is right. It's something that the Revit person has shared with me, so I can actually send him back the things properly placed, you know, instead of having to do guesswork. You also have access to the heights, the elevations, different parameters, if it has any custom parameters in Revit, so you can kind of like extract all the information that you need. And we can do the same thing with the types. Which expands this humongous thing, which is not very straightforward, mainly because we only want, is the beams not here? Am I missing something, Bilal?
Structural framing.
Structural frames, structural beam systems, structural equipment, structural foundations.
I guess it's beam systems. I don't know.
Let's see.
Let me double check.
Let's see.
Its name should be Dimension Lumber, the family name. And type.
The family name, structural beam system. I may be missing something here. As always, live demos are.
Do you want me to send
critical.
override the branch? I can, I guess, send it from here.
Yeah, send it to see if anything is wrong. But anyway, we can skip the error part, which is the proper family and the proper thing, so I can actually show this properly working.
Yeah, the family name is Dimension space Lumber. Yep, without any space at the end. And the type name is 38X, not space, yeah, 64.
64. Beautiful.
Let me double check, just so we're clear. Dimension number 38 by 64. Is that X, capital X or?
Yes, capital.
Yeah, it should be small.
Okay, beautiful. So this is mainly the reason why you send the project information, to not have to do this. But somehow in one of these ones is the one that I was looking for, and my brain is expecting it elsewhere right now. Not sure why. We will send you a fixed version of this once we finish this up. But once you got this correctly,
Don't forget to change the X to small x.
X to small x, X to small x. There you go.
Yeah.
Once we got this correctly and we have our information loop properly connected without our current live demo hack, we can send this information again, now knowing that this information is valid and has been properly linked. And we can receive that in Revit. Now I'm doing this trembling because everything is failing on me. We can receive that in Revit. Notice that we send the information to the project info, but we sent the new beams to the ceiling design branch, and we have two different cards, one for each operation. We can receive from a branch and send to another branch, kind of like independently. So receiving this, hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing happens.
Nothing happens on your end.
Why did nothing happen? Oh my God, drama in our live demo. Let
You
me
were in
just
the
see.
sample one.
It is correct what I've sent. No, I haven't skipped any steps that I'm being like silly about. Let me see if I can create a new stream. Receive, not main, but ceiling design.
Okay, I just overrided your project information. Maybe try that. I don't know why it's not doing it.
Do you have it working? Can we switch the sides and you show them the received part? Because this was working this morning. I am baffled. I'm fairly certain I have skipped something.
Okay, let's do that.
Meanwhile, I debug my side of things.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Let me just stop sharing to not.
All right, here we go, guys. By the way, maybe your project, the Revit file you opened did not have the correct family and type. That's what I'm suspecting of, because I just sent my project information and it included the structural framing elements. So that's why maybe it's not creating, because you don't have that family and type.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess you opened the wrong Revit file. These things happen, so that's totally fine. But you know, just to showcase that the structural framing category exists, everyone, it's right here with its family and type, its family name and type name, whatever, everything is here. So let's go back to Revit. And as Alan showed, now we can receive from the same card. This time we're going to receive from the ceiling design folder. Fingers crossed, it should create the ceiling design, which it's doing it at the moment.
Okay, it's doing something now.
Yep, here we go. Here we go.
Woohoo!
Look at that.
Okay, my local setup was doing something funky.
Yeah, your local setup was not correct. Okay, everyone. So this is, how you create and connect both Rhino and Revit. And if Alan had the correct family project setup, whatever, I could have actually shared the project information with you. But anyways, so let's have a Dongiep Lee has a question that he can't see Speckle 2 menu at the top, because you need to create a Grasshopper document and add a node to the active project. Once you do that, you can see the Speckle 2 tab at the top.
Yeah, this is going to change in the next version, by the way, but for now it requires for you to open a document with nodes in it, not just open the Grasshopper window on startup.
Exactly. So let's take a quick break, everyone. By the way, this is how that Grasshopper curves looks like in Revit. So these are now native Revit elements. So it's
we can take a break if people want, but there's only like half an hour left, so maybe we can just ram through it.
What do you say, everyone? Any preference?
We can keep going.
Yes, let's
Keep it going.
Any
Yeah,
let's keep
objection?
it going then.
Let's go.
Okay, the Grasshopper
Guys,
part.
comments looking so good.
Grasshopper part took longer than we, I guess, anticipated, and yeah, these
Yes.
things happen. Anyways, so now what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna quickly go through Blender and PowerPoint, but I will go like really fast. So try to catch up. You don't have to exactly follow my steps since this meeting is being recorded. I guess you can watch it later on and stop whenever you want to follow along. So let's go. We had the Rhino stuff here, right? And then we had whatever, everything included. So I'm just gonna hide these guys, and I'm gonna create a new branch, and let's call this one ArcVis. And let's select everything. I'm gonna unlock, and let's select everything and send it to send to Blender. This time we're gonna open Blender. As you know, Blender is a free and open source project and software, which is really great on user side, and it's really capable of doing a lot of things. And recently, what we have started to see is that a lot of users are starting to use Blender for their ArcVis operations. And since Speckle is freeing up your models out of their proprietary file formats, you can also use Speckle to connect between Rhino and Blender, or between Revit and Blender, and simulate some sort of a workflow in there. All right. So again, once you install the Blender connector, you will have a new tab. The Blender users will know that you have this ability. Where is my options? See if I can. Anyways, yeah, you will end up with this new tab called Speckle. And this is basically your Speckle connector within Blender, right? You have some sort of similar UI, at least the organization is the same. At the top, you have the users, streams, branches, and selections, whatever. So now we are going to receive from the AECtech project. So I'm going to select that one. And the folder is the ArcVis folder. And we're going to receive the latest commit made to that folder. So let's receive. For now, we don't really care about cleaning meshes, so I'm just going to click on OK. Okay, something funky happens in the background. What happens? I think these softwares have joined forces to borg our demos. Alan, I have a feeling.
Yes, I have the same feeling. Live demo curse is haunting us.
Okay, no, she's in that front. Let me actually try to send a smaller portion of the same model, like only the furnitures maybe. So it's quicker. This is send. So from Speckle, let's go to the ArcVis folder and let's receive. Did I send? I did. So we can also add a stream by URL. So that's what I'm going to do now. If I want to, receive that specific comment from the Speckleverse. So let's do that. If this fails one more time, then I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint.
There you go.
There we go. Right, great. So this is the same file we had in Rhino. I'm going to switch to the shading tab because we're going to play with some materials this time. So for those of you who are familiar with Blender, this is Blender, what our one and only lovely visualization, animation, modeling software. So what we are doing as Speckle is, when you receive your model from any other platform, we are converting them into Speckle formats, and on receive, we are trying to create as much as information as possible in that host application. In Blender's case, we are creating geometry and as well as materials, because Blender cares mostly about these two information, right? By the way, if you're coming from Revit, we're also adding some sort of custom properties into your objects, but it's not really the topic of this demonstration. So, let's say that I've selected this object. When I select it and go to its material properties, you can see that this has a wood material assigned. If I select this guy on the bottom, its material is gray. So let's say that you want to replace this material's color with something more dark, you can do so. And let's say that for wood, you want to replace that material with something you found on the internet. And I downloaded one from Polyhaven. Let me quickly show you that. Polyhaven is a 3D asset library. So I went to textures, wood, and then I guess I've downloaded the plywood texture from here, right? Simply click on download. And what we're going to do now is we're going to replace the default color texture setup with a PBR texture setup. I'm going to do Control-Shift-T and go to the downloaded texture and select everything and click on Principal Texture Setup. And it's going to replace that ugly color with a beautiful looking PBR material. So again, we are creating some sort of live link between these two applications. So let's say that I've decided to make some changes in here. So I don't know, let me close my Grasshopper. No. Yeah, like let's say that you've decided to remove one and maybe scale this one in this direction, right? So I can do another send, scales, shelf. Here we go. And I'm going to come back to Blender and re-receive the same from the same branch. And voila, we have updated your geometry. And the beautiful thing is we are preserving the material changes you made in Blender. So let's say, the thing is that we are keeping track of materials by their names. So, if you import material from external resources and change its name to, in this case, since this was a wood, to wood, when you receive next time, we're going to use that material, right? So this way we are creating some sort of connection between different set of tools dedicated to different workflows. So you can still create your design within Rhino and do your renderings within Blender. So this was a quick demo of the Blender workflow. Any questions about that? I know this was quite fast. Maybe like too fast. But this one is quite easy.
Yeah, thankfully, architectural visualization workflows usually have less trouble because they're like finalists. They are the end results of the whole thing. So there's less back and forth. Although with Blender Beam, there's a lot to be said about Blender as an architectural design tool.
Yeah, it's getting there, I guess. Okay, another use case or cool thing you can do with Speckle. We haven't created a blog post or tutorial for it, so you guys are the first one seeing this. So, normally you can't actually embed models into PowerPoint, but with Speckle, you can, since we are totally web-based, and you can embed your 3D model into anywhere using our embed functionality. So if you go to your, any of the comments, I'm going to go to the main one. So let's open this one. So when you click on share, you have the optionality yeah, you have the option to embed your model into a website, into a Notion document, anywhere, basically. So as I said, you can do the same thing for PowerPoint, and we are going to do that basically by first enabling an add-on in PowerPoint. Simply go to Insert, and under Add-ins, go to Store, and I guess it was one of the recommended ones. Yeah, this one, Web Viewer. So I'm going to add this one to my PowerPoint session, and it's going to create something like this. So this basically allows you to insert a web page into your PowerPoint presentation. Right? So now I can simply go to Speckle, go to Copy, and you have a bunch of embed options. Let's say that I want to go with a transparent background. I want to hide the viewer controls. Let's hide the viewers. Let's keep the viewer sidebar, object selection info, whatever. So this is the settings I want to have within my PowerPoint. So now what we will do is we will simply copy this link. But since this web viewer add-on expects a URL, we need to filter out the necessary information out of the copied text. So I'm going to paste that into my search bar. And I only need the part here under stores, right? So I'm going to remove from here to here and from iframe to source, like so. So this is basically the URL that I'm going to use to embed that viewer into PowerPoint. So let's go back to PowerPoint. I'm going to paste that link. But now I see a problem because I have www whatever in the beginning, and I also have the HTTPS in the beginning, and I don't want to end up with double HTTPSs, so I'm going to remove that one as well. So we only have the speckle.xyz/embed stream ID, comment ID, and the settings of our embed. So let's click on Preview and click on Load. And here is your Revit model embedded within the PowerPoint. So I guess I can do things like this maybe. Let me get this one on the right-hand side. Let's get this guy on the left-hand side. This looks cool. And I'm gonna make it Comic Sans, because why not?
Because why not?
Right, everyone. So now you have the ability to hide. And by the way, you have the full package embedded in your PowerPoint. So you can still, filter categories. So, now I've isolated rooms. I can do whatever I want within the without leaving the PowerPoint environment. I see something in the chat. So cool. Yes, it is. Okay, so any questions about this? Because we're, I guess, getting the end of our workshop.
Yes, just Power BI left.
Yes, so the final demo is the Power BI thingy, and I'm going to pass it on to you, Ellen, again.
Since my Revit seems to be misbehaving, I'm gonna ask you to send the rooms to a different stream, if this is a possibility.
Yeah, it is. Let's go back to Revit. Right. So do you want me to create a new branch?
Yeah, just create a new branch and send the rooms so we can do the Power BI exercise with them.
Okay, I'll create a new branch or folder called Rooms. And under filters, now I'm gonna, only send a specific category. In this case, it is rooms. So I can search for rooms, select it. The current selection is rooms, and rooms from Revit. Click on send. Okay, I did. It's right there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Then now I can take over for real. Thank you very much, Bilal.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with a little bit of Power BI, which is, I think, our most recent connector and the one that requires the most love also. So we do require some feedback on this, but it is already on a working state where you can do some things with it. So we wanted to showcase it to hopefully get you excited and get you to trash around with it and come back to us with some complaints and extra ideas of what do you think is missing. So I'm just, I am sharing, correct? Yes.
Yes.
So the first thing that we would need to do is, as Bilal explained before, there's a couple of links on the handout that we sent, but those links are fairly straightforward because they both point to our two Speckle Power BI repos. We have a Speckle Power BI named repo, which contains the data connector, i.e. the part of the Power BI side that communicates with Speckle and fetches the data from Speckle. So you can actually view it as a table and do queries in Power BI with it using Power Query. So this guy is released as a .mez file that you can download from our releases. We will eventually have a manager installer for it, but for now it's a little bit manual mode. And the way you install it is you copy the MEZ file to whatever your user folder is. You go to your documents folder, and then if you have it, you copy it there. If you don't, you create the folders called Power BI Desktop /custom connectors, and you dump that MEZ file in there. So let's just go ahead and check that. So I have my MEZ file here, and somehow a couple of Speckle logos for some reason. So once you've done that, if you restart your Power BI, it should be picking up on the MEZ file, and you should be able to go to get data, and this should open a new pop-up sometime in this century. There you go. And where this, if you've already used Power BI before, this should be familiar because this is the way that you obtain data from anywhere. But if you actually search for Speckle, you would see that you now have a Speckle option. And when you press connect, it will ask you for a stream URL, just like Grasshopper does. So exactly same behavior. You go to the commit you want to fetch, or to the branch you want to fetch, copy the URL, paste it.
It's not that one.
Not Benny rules.
Refresh. Yeah, it's rooms.
Rooms.
At the bottom, yeah.
Yes, beautiful. Rooms. You press OK, and oops, I should have canceled my data. Let me just cancel that. I'm gonna refresh this just because I already have my settings done. So it didn't ask me for authentication. So I'm just gonna delete this, and I will walk you through this in a second. Clear permissions, delete. There you go. So just as new, we can go get data. Sad thing about Power BI is that it takes 5 seconds to do anything. We write Speckle, we hit connect. It asks us for a URL, we paste it, and then once you hit OK, if you haven't fetched data from Speckle before, it's gonna ask you a very simple question. Is this a stream that is publicly accessible and you don't need authentication to receive? Or is this a stream that is private and hence you need some sort of like user authenticated to receive as Bilal or as me or as any of you, no? In this particular case, this stream is public, and it also asks you to what level of your particular URL you want to apply this authentication to. So you could apply this authentication just as for the rooms branches, for the entire stream, or for anything inside Speckle XYZ. This is kind of like how Power BI deals with authenticated users. So when you're selecting public stream, I usually recommend to select the stream or the actual URL that you're connecting, just for to prevent this public access to being used anywhere else that may not have a public stream. And when selecting a private stream, if this were the case, this is a little bit tricky because it's not very user-friendly yet. We're looking into ways of improving this, but you need to create what is called an access token. And the access token, I'm not going to actually create it because this stream is public, but just so you know, the access token is created by going into your profile page and scrolling down to the developer settings. You can create a new access token that is like a unique string that you can copy and paste here, and it will authenticate as you. In this case, we're just going to keep it public. We're going to press connect. I'm just going to keep it simple since we're running out of time. Since the rooms, like the stream that we were using, is publicly accessible, it managed to fetch the information and give you some preview. And it's also telling you the data in the preview has been truncated due to size limits. So you may not be seeing all of the data. You're just seeing like a small chunk to start with. And so you have two options here. You can either load the data that you're getting straight away, or transform it to meet some of your specifications. Notice that you already have like some table data that is quite useful in some cases. You have the stream URL where this object came from, the URL type if you were fetching from a branch or a commit or whatever you were doing, the object ID of each specific object in that stream, and its type. And finally, we have this data column with some Power Query records, which is where all of the extra information of this object is contained. So if it's a level or a room, and a room has a name, you can access it inside this record table. So since it's not directly accessible, we need to hit transform data to kind of like explore our data the same way we were doing it in Grasshopper, where we were deconstructing each object. In this particular case, you can create like your own filters and queries to kind of like just boil down the things that you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just interested on the rooms. I don't care about anything else. So I'm going to click on the speckle type and deselect the meshes, which are the mesh representation of the room. It's just like the geometry. It doesn't contain the room name or the room info in any sense. So I'm not really interested in this at this particular moment. And this will start adding steps to your query, the query that we're building. The next step, now that we have only rooms in our table, we can go ahead into the data column and press this like outwards kind of arrow icon, which is the expand column icon. And this will give you a list of all of the properties that that object has, so that you can kind of expand them into a bigger column. In this case, notice that it says list may be incomplete, load more. If you're looking for some sort of property that is not here, it's because sometimes Power BI skips, in order to go faster, skips some things, but you can always request it to kind of like load everything, in which case you would be sure 100% that it has every single property that we want. So what we can do here is say, okay, I want to know the area, the name, the level, the volume, no, not the volume, the category, and that's about it.
Their categories rooms, so maybe we don't need that.
Yeah, category either. So area, name, and level should be fine, and the units, for example, to see which units they were modeled in. If you like to know which the area is in meters squared or in inches or whatever. And it says use original column name as prefix. So for the first step of this, I recommend to say no. This is something that we're starting to improve and kind of like iterate around. But I will explain when we hit the viewer in a minute. But for the first time you expand, when you're expanding this data column, say no to the use original column name as prefix. That way, you're basically expanding this room, and the names of the properties will be kept. If we had pressed that checklist, the name of the column would be data.area, data.name, which is kind of redundant. So for the first step, we can remove it. And then let's say we have this level, but notice that the level column is also a column of records. So that means that we can also expand that to give us like more deeper information of that object. So we could go ahead and say, okay, for the level, I want the elevation and the name. And there's some parameters and other things that I could dig even deeper into, but I'm just going to keep it at that. One second. I think I failed to press. Okay, so now that we're going deeper into the object, notice that we got a name column, and then the level has a name. So now it generated like a name and a name.1. So there's like a conflict there. So in this case, when you're going like one level, two level deeper, I do recommend to provide like a default prefix so that you can distinguish what is the name of the room from the level.name or like deeper instances of that. So I'm just going to edit that step and tell it that I want my prefix for this step to be level. And notice that now my column is called level.name and the elevation is called level.elevation. So it implies that it's not an attribute of the room, it's an attribute of the property of the level. And once we've done this, we have all the information that we wanted to expand. We have the type, the level it is, the height that it is, the units, the area. So one last thing that we need to, I recommend to do, this is not strictly required, is to select all of the columns that you've expanded and go to transform and detect data type. And this will basically turn all of the column names that are only numbers into number type, all of the column names that are only text into text type. So it just allows Power BI to make some smarter decisions on the data that you're expanded. And once that is done, we can go ahead and put a name to our query, call it Speckle Rooms, and close that. Do you want to apply your changes? Yes. And hopefully this will run the query in its completeness and generate a query in my fields sidebar, which we can now use to populate tables in our reports. So like our step one of our Power BI thing, like integration has been done. We can drop in a matrix, for example, and tell it that we want the stream URL and the object ID to be the rows. And then for each object ID, we want its level name, its actual name, and its area. So up until now, basically what we just done is do some like tabular magic. We could always kind of like reorganize our data so that it's like organized by level, or like the actual organization of your table in your report is totally up to you once you have your raw data in there. But let's go ahead to do the interesting part, which is adding the Speckle viewer. The Speckle viewer lives also on our repo called Speckle Power BI Visuals. And you can also get it on the releases. Just download the PBI Viz file. And then in order to use that, you need to, in your visualizations folder, like in your visualizations tab, there is a like triple dot icon. And in there is an import a visual from a file option. And this allows you to specify, let me just download that again. It's gonna be faster. This allows you to specify the file, the PBIVs file that you want to load. And once that is done, it should appear in your visualizations, available visualizations. So if you just drag it into your report, it will create a new visual of it. And this visual requires 2 inputs mandatory and a 3rd input that is highly recommended to use. The first 2 inputs are the stream URL of our table, of the query that we got, and the object ID of the query that we got. And as soon as we plug these 2 in, our data will start loading into the viewer and allowing us to view the results of it. But you will notice it's not very interactive by itself because it's missing an extra set of information. No? In order for it to be interactive so that you select something in your table and it displays in your viewer and filters in your viewer, we need to also add in an object data to it. In this case, we could use, for example, the level name. Oddly enough, this didn't color as I would have expected. Interesting. Or you could use numerical values such as the area of a room. And the difference between using something that is text-based or something that is numerical-based is that the viewer will color them with using different modes. So with a text-based approach, it will try to identify its unique entity and paint it as a color. So if you have level 1, it will be one color. If we have level 2, it will be a different color. But with numerical values, what it tries to do is to paint it as a gradient. So in this particular case, you can control it's painting like the area of those rooms based on a particular gradient that you can control from the color options in the visualization of your visual. So you can change the gradient to something that is more into your liking, and also change the background color to whatever you want so that it visualizes better. But you also have some extra nice options like to change it to ortho mode if that conveys better the information that you want to describe, and set up a default view so that the startup will automatically use that view by default. The default is obviously perspective, and you can pan around and do as you wish. And once you have this set, it also has the ability of double linking what you're selecting from your table with what you're selecting from what is being shown in the visual. And I may be able to give you a better view of this if I actually put this black, because you may be able to see that what happens is that when I select something in my table, it will ghost everything else from the visual and only show you the items that have been highlighted. And that was basically it, unless I'm missing something, Bilal.
Do we have a question? Is the interaction bidirectional?
Not yet. This was a limitation on our side more than on Power BI side of our old viewer. We have now rewritten the entire viewer from scratch, which is now being used in our deployments, such as Speckle XYZ and latest, but hasn't made its way yet to the Power BI visual. Once that happens, I cannot promise a timeline, but once that happens, we will definitely be able to do bidirectional, so that when you select something from here, it will also filter out on the table when possible, because there's like combinations that do not allow this in Power BI. So like there's several visualization things that will never perform this, but at least to the ones that allow this, we are already planning on supporting it.
Okay, I guess that's it. It's 8 o'clock my time, which is right on time.
Yes.
So, any other questions, everyone?
Just to clarify here, this window on the left came from Speckle, because I'm not seeing how to create a visualization window.
This guy, you need to import a visual from a file.
Okay, perfect.
That you downloaded from the Speckle Visuals repo. Is the PBI Viz instead of the MEZ one.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will make it better in the future, but for now it's a little bit painfully manual. Cool. Any other questions, doubts?
Okay. Yeah, if you have any other questions, by the way, like not related to workshop but overall Speckle, these are where you can get started with. Speckle.xyz is the server we used. Speckle.guide is all things related to Speckle, is being documented there. We have a tutorials platform on our website, as well as Speckle.community, where we hang out most of the time. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them over there, and we will definitely, help you with your questions.
Yeah, and your questions also help us, so it's bidirectional.
Is there a Speckle roadmap available? We have an internal roadmap, but it's not available publicly.
There used to be one.
Yeah,
now I'm doubting. We will forward your question to our founders to see what happens to the public roadmap.
You guys, just wanted to thank you again. Really, really awesome stuff today, and we're all lucky to be here with you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us the chance to present Speckle. It might be a bit overwhelming, but yeah, you have the recording of this workshop. Hopefully, if you missed any part, I guess you can watch it later on.
Yeah,
and
sure. We're always willing to help.
What was that, Alan?
And we're always willing to help if you happen to be like 2 weeks from now trying to redo this. Just ping us on our community. We'd be happy to deal with it.
Well, thanks again, guys.
Cool. Thank all of you for staying with us all this time. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the next AECtech.
All right, everyone. See you next year.
Bye. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.